Yellow Creek Valley, 1866. Gunfire crackled through the dawn air, punctuated by screams and the acrid scent of smoke. Ethan Hayes crouched behind a boulder, his scout's buckskin jacket stained with dust and sweat, watching as soldiers stormed through the Apache village. Women clutching children ran in terror as thatched wickiups blazed in the growing light. "Search every shelter!" Lieutenant Blackwood's voice cut through the chaos. "No survivors!" Ethan's hands tightened around his rifle, knuckles white with tension. This wasn't what he had signed on for. His job as a scout was to find the hostile bands that had been raiding settlements, not to lead soldiers to peaceful villages. "Sir, there are only women and children here," he protested, approaching Blackwood. The lieutenant's cold eyes fixed on him. "Orders are orders, Hayes. Every Apache is a potential threat." A movement in the rocks above the village caught Ethan's eye. Following his instinct, he broke away from the main force, climbing the rocky slope. At the mouth of a small cave, he found them, an Apache woman clutching a young girl to her chest, eyes wide with terror. For a moment, time stood still as their gazes locked. The woman's dark eyes burned with a mixture of fear and defiance. She spoke softly in her native tongue, then switched to broken English. "Ki tane ye ash," she whispered. "Shadowbringer. You will never find light." Ethan lowered his rifle. "I can help you escape. Come quickly." The woman hesitated, clutching her daughter tighter. Before she could respond, shouts erupted below. "Hayes, movement in the rocks!" Soldiers were climbing toward them. Ethan turned back to the woman. "Now we must—" A volley of shots exploded behind him. Bullets ricocheted off the rock walls of the cave. Ethan felt a searing pain in his right hand as he instinctively reached to shield the woman and child. The last thing he saw was the woman's body jerking with the impact of bullets. Her daughter still clutched in her arms, their blood splattering across the cave wall. His own scream echoed in his ears as darkness claimed him. Arizona Territory, 1878. Ethan Hayes jolted awake, his hand reflexively reaching for the revolver beside his bed. Sweat soaked his nightshirt despite the pre-dawn chill. The same nightmare, always the same. Outside his cabin, an owl hooted mournfully as first light crept over the eastern ridge. Ethan swung his legs over the edge of his cot, running his left hand through gray-streaked hair. His right hand, a mass of twisted scar tissue from the bullet and subsequent burns, throbbed with phantom pain. 12 years since Yellow Creek. 12 years of nightmares. 12 years of whiskey that never quite drowned the memories. He poured himself a measure from the bottle on his bedside table, grimacing as he swallowed. The locals called him the madman in the woods, a recluse who wanted nothing to do with civilization. The Apache knew him by another name, Ki tane ye ash, Shadowbringer. Ethan moved to the small window, looking out at the rugged landscape he called home. His isolated cabin sat on the edge of disputed territory, too far from settlements for most white folks, too close to Apache lands for comfort, just the way he wanted it. After his court-martial and dishonorable discharge, solitude had been his only companion. Well, solitude and the ghosts. His gaze fell on the framed photograph beside his bed, the only personal item in the sparse cabin. Two young men in army uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders. Ethan and his younger brother Thomas, before Yellow Creek, before everything changed. 7 years since Thomas died, supposedly killed in an Apache ambush while scouting near the border. Ethan had never believed the official report. Something about it felt wrong, but by then, his reputation in the army was so tarnished that no one would listen to his concerns. Just another ghost. Just another failure. The first rays of sun crested the horizon as Ethan began his morning routine. He stoked the fire, put coffee on to boil, and checked the perimeter of his property. Habits from military days he couldn't shake. His Appaloosa stallion nickered softly from the small corral, the only living creature he allowed himself to care for. He was brushing down the horse when he heard it, distant gunfire echoing across the canyon. Ethan paused, head cocked. 3 shots in quick succession, then silence. Then more shots, scattered this time. His hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Most days he minded his own business, let the world tear itself apart without him. But gunfire this close meant trouble could find him whether he sought it or not. Grabbing his Winchester repeater from the cabin porch, Ethan mounted the Appaloosa and rode toward the ridge, keeping to the tree line. From the vantage point, he could see them. Three riders pursuing a lone figure across the open ground below. The figure ran with desperate purpose, dark hair streaming behind. An Apache woman. And the men chasing her weren't soldiers. Bounty hunters, most likely, from the mismatched gear and hard faces. One fired another shot, the bullet kicking up dust near the woman's feet. Ethan watched dispassionately. Not his fight, not his business. He'd learned long ago that interfering only brought more pain. But as he turned to leave, the woman stumbled, falling to her knees in exhaustion. One of the riders dismounted, approaching her with a rope. Something in her desperate defiance, in the set of her shoulders even in defeat, triggered a memory of another Apache woman, clutching her child in a cave as death approached. "Damn it all," Ethan muttered, adjusting his grip on the Winchester. He descended the ridge at a controlled pace, positioning himself between the pursuing riders and his cabin. When they spotted him, the lead rider raised a hand, signaling the others to halt. The Apache woman remained on her knees, chest heaving, as one man kept a tight grip on her arm. "Afternoon," Ethan called, rifle held casually but visibly across his lap. "Seems you folks are having quite the chase on my property." The leader, a weathered man with a patched cavalry coat and tobacco-stained beard, studied Ethan with calculating eyes. "Hayes, ain't it? Heard you'd settled in these parts." Ethan's expression remained neutral. Recognition was never good. "You have me at a disadvantage. Fletcher Rollins. We met briefly at Fort Apache before your departure from the Army. What brings you to my land, Rollins?" Rollins gestured toward the woman. "Business. This Apache she-devil was caught stealing near Cooper's Canyon. Army don't want the paperwork, so we're handling the matter privately." The woman's head was bowed, but Ethan could see blood on her temple and rope burns on her wrists. Her buckskin dress was torn at the shoulder. "Seems an awful lot of trouble for one thief," Ethan observed. The shorter man holding the woman spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Word is you got a fine Appaloosa stallion. We're proposing a trade." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The horse was his only companion, trained over 4 years. "Not for sale." "Ain't selling, trading," Rollins countered, gesturing at the woman. "She's worth something to someone. More than an animal to you." For the first time, Ethan looked directly at the woman. Her head lifted slightly, and their eyes met. Despite the dirt and dried blood on her face, her gaze was steady, unflinching. Not pleading, not fearful. Something else entirely. Recognition, perhaps? But how could she know him? "Where'd you really get her?" Ethan asked, shifting the rifle slightly. Rollins' smile faded. "Told you. Caught her stealing." 3 armed men chasing one Apache woman across open country because she stole... What exactly? The shorter man's hand moved to his pistol. "Look, Hayes, we ain't asking. Woman for horse. Fair trade." Ethan calculated the odds. 3 against 1 out in the open. Poor odds, even for someone with his experience. And the woman looked barely conscious. "Take the stallion," he said finally. "He's in the corral around back." Relief flashed across Rollins's face. 2 of the men headed toward the back of the cabin while Rollins remained, holding the woman by a rope around her wrists. "Smart choice," Rollins said. "Always were practical." Ethan didn't respond, watching as the men returned with his prize horse. 4 years of work gone in a moment. Rollins hauled the woman forward and pushed her roughly toward the cabin. She stumbled, falling to her knees. "She's your problem now," Rollins said, mounting his horse. "Might still be worth something to someone else if you change your mind." The 3 men rode away, the Appaloosa trailing behind. Ethan remained motionless until they disappeared over the ridge, dust settling in their wake. Only then did he look down at the woman kneeling in the dirt. She had managed to sit upright, but her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. The rope around her wrists had been tied to his porch rail as if she were luggage. Blood had dried where the fibers cut into her skin. Without speaking, Ethan turned and entered the cabin. He set the rifle against the wall, poured a cup of water, and drank half. Through the open door, he could see the woman hadn't moved. The wind picked up, carrying the first cool breath of evening. He sat at his table, staring at the wall. Images flickered behind his eyes, the burning village. Screams in darkness. A woman and child in a cave. He closed his eyes, pressing his palms against them until the memories retreated. When he opened them again, the sun had begun to set. Outside, coyotes called to one another. The woman would hear them too, would know what they meant in these parts. He cursed under his breath, stood, and walked outside with his hunting knife in hand. The woman tensed as he approached but didn't struggle. When he touched the rope, her skin felt hot with fever. The knife blade flashed once, twice, and the bindings fell away. Her arms dropped forward and she nearly collapsed. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, surprised by how light she felt, all tension and bone covered in sweat and dirt. "I'm not keeping you," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. It was a statement of intent, a line drawn between temporary mercy and permanent responsibility. He lifted her and carried her inside, laying her on the spare cot in the corner of his one-room cabin. He covered her with a blanket, then lit a lamp as darkness fell. In the yellow light, he saw the extent of her injuries. Bruises darkened her ribs and shoulders. A cut on her thigh had crusted with dirt, and her feet were cracked and swollen. But what caught his attention was a necklace around her throat, a small piece of jade carved with a sun symbol, identical to one he had seen before, identical to the one Thomas had always worn. Ethan fetched a tin cup of water and set it near the cot. The woman had already lost consciousness, her breath coming in labored gasps. He stood watching her for a long moment, then turned away. "Not my fight," he murmured, sitting heavily in the chair by the table. "Not my problem." But he didn't sleep. Instead, he cleaned his rifle, oiled the action, and kept it within reach. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted to the woman, making sure she still breathed. Outside, the night deepened, stars appearing in a clear sky. In the darkest part of night, the woman stirred. Her eyes opened slightly, focusing with difficulty on Ethan's silhouette by the window. "Kita ne ye ash," she whispered, her English clearer than he expected. "Shadowbringer, I never thought to see you again." Ethan turned sharply. "You know me?" A faint smile touched her cracked lips. "My name is Kaya, and yes, I know you. Every Apache knows your face." The name meant nothing to him, but the term Shadowbringer struck like a physical blow. It was what the Apache had called him after Yellow Creek, after he had led soldiers to their villages. "You're mistaken," he said, turning back to the window. "Rest. You can leave when you're strong enough." "Your brother," she whispered, her voice fading. "Spirit Walker. He spoke of you." Ethan froze, his back still to her. "My brother is dead." But Kaya had already slipped back into unconsciousness, her revelation hanging in the air between them like smoke. By morning, Kaya was feverish. Ethan dampened a cloth and laid it across her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open, but didn't seem to register him. He cleaned the worst of her wounds, wrapping a bandage around the cut on her thigh and wiping the dirt from her face. When he touched the jade pendant at her throat, her hand jerked away instinctively. "What is this?" he asked when her eyes focused on him briefly. "The sacred stone," she replied, her voice weaker than the night before. "It bears the map to Spirit Valley. My father's people." Ethan nodded once, filing away the information. He offered her water, which she took in small sips. When she'd finished, he spoke again. "Those men who brought you, they mentioned Cooper's Canyon. What were you doing there?" Kaya closed her eyes. For a moment, he thought she'd slip back into unconsciousness. Then she whispered, "Running. Always running." "From what?" "From Blackwood, the blue coat. He searches for what is not his to take." The name sent a chill through Ethan. Colonel Jeremiah Blackwood was known among both military men and settlers, known for his ruthlessness, his ambition, and his hatred of the Apache. The same Blackwood who had been a lieutenant at Yellow Creek. If he was hunting this woman, it meant trouble would follow. "What does he want from you?" Kaya's eyes opened again, clearer now, studying him. "You truly don't remember me?" Ethan shook his head. "Should I?" She attempted to sit up, winced, and fell back. "Yellow Creek. I was there when you came with the soldiers." The blood seemed to drain from Ethan's face. "That was 12 years ago." "Yes, I was a child. My mother hid me in the rocks." Her gaze grew distant. "I watched you enter the cave where she hid with my sister." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. The woman and child in the cave had died. He had seen it happen. "Your mother and sister." "Dead," Kaya confirmed, her voice flat. "My mother shielded me with her body when the shooting started. I alone survived." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. One of his ghosts, suddenly flesh and blood before him. The child from the cave had lived, had grown into this woman, and somehow, impossibly, she was speaking of Thomas. My brother, he said carefully. You mentioned him last night. Thomas died 7 years ago, killed by Apache, according to the army. Kaya's expression changed subtly. Not killed, not by us. She paused, gathering strength. Your brother is Spirit Walker. He came to our people 5 years ago, learned our ways, our language. That's not possible, Ethan insisted. I identified his body myself. Yet even as he spoke, doubt crept in. The body had been badly decomposed, the face unrecognizable. He had identified Thomas by his uniform, his signet ring, and the jade pendant that now hung around Kaya's neck. The man you buried was not your brother, Kaya said with quiet certainty. Spirit Walker lives, or did, until Blackwood took him. Ethan's mind reeled with implications. If what she said was true, then Thomas was alive, and had been among the Apache while Ethan grieved him. And now Blackwood had him. Why would Blackwood want my brother? Kaya's hand moved to the jade pendant. For this, for what it leads to. She studied his face with unexpected intensity. Your brother saved me from slave traders. He lived among us, became one of us. We were to be married when Blackwood's men came. The pieces were beginning to fit together, yet the picture they formed seemed impossible. Thomas, living with the Apache, in love with this woman, the proper Boston-raised boy who had followed Ethan into the army out of familial duty? These men who attacked your village, Ethan pressed. You're certain it was Blackwood? Yes, 3 weeks ago at Pine Bluff. Many died. My father was wounded but escaped with some of our people. I carried the sacred stone, but was separated during the attack. Blackwood's men, Rollins and others, tracked me. And now they've delivered you to me. Ethan's voice hardened with realization. This wasn't random. Rollins knew exactly who I was, where to find me. A trap, Kaya agreed, for both of us. The implications settled between them. Rollins would report to Blackwood. Soldiers or bounty hunters might come looking for them both. For the stone. You need to leave, Ethan decided. If you can walk, I'll give you supplies, a weapon. Head north toward... No, Kaya interrupted, struggling to sit up. She was stronger than she looked, determination lending her strength. If I leave alone, they will find me, and they will come here regardless, believing you know what I have told you. She was right, and Ethan knew it. Rollins had seen to that the moment he'd left her here. What would you suggest then? We wait, she said simply. My brother Dakota will be searching for me. If he finds us first, there is hope. Ethan laughed without humor. Hope for you, maybe. Your brother isn't likely to welcome me with open arms given my history. True, Kaya acknowledged, her expression serious. But I will speak for you. You have saved me. That counts for something among my people. Ethan ran a scarred hand through his hair, considering options he didn't like. Stay and wait for trouble to find them. Leave together, risking open country with a woman still recovering from her ordeal. Neither choice appealed. 2 days, he said finally. If your brother hasn't found us by then, we leave together. Kaya nodded. 2 days. Throughout that day, Ethan watched the horizon while Kaya rested and regained her strength. He checked his weapons, counted ammunition, and planned routes in his mind. North through the high country or west toward the border territories, places where a disgraced scout and an Apache woman might disappear. As dusk approached, Kaya joined him on the porch. She moved carefully but with increasing confidence, her body healing faster than he'd expected. May I ask something? She said, settling beside him on the step. Ask. The cave at Yellow Creek. Why did you come alone? Why did you lower your rifle? The question caught him off guard. He had spent years trying not to remember those details. I heard movement, thought it might be warriors. He stared at the distant mountains. Found your mother and sister instead. And you tried to help them escape. It wasn't a question, but Ethan nodded anyway, for all the good it did. Your hand, she said, gesturing to his scarred right hand. From that day? Bullets shattered the bones. Burns came later, after the court-martial, after I refused to lead more raids. His mouth twisted. Punishment from a campfire that caught my tent. Accident, they claimed. They sat in silence as the first stars appeared. From the ridge came the cry of a hunting cougar. Tell me about Thomas, Ethan said finally. How did my brother come to live among the Apache? Kaya's expression softened. 5 summers ago, I was taken by men who raid our villages for women to sell in Mexico. Spirit Walker, Thomas, was scouting alone when he found their camp. He killed 2 men and freed me and another woman. That sounds like Thomas, Ethan admitted. Always had more courage than sense. I was wounded. He took me to his camp, tended my injuries. When I was strong enough to travel, he insisted on escorting me back to my people. A smile touched her lips. My father offered him gifts and thanks. He refused all except knowledge. He wished to learn our language, our ways. And your people accepted this? A white soldier? Not all, Kaya acknowledged. Many distrusted him, but he proved himself honest, respectful. He learned quickly, hunted well, shared all he had. Her voice softened. And later, when sickness came to our village, he rode 3 days to Fort Apache for medicine, risking arrest as a deserter. The Thomas she described was both familiar and strange to Ethan, his brother's courage and compassion, but in a context he could never have imagined. We were to be married in the spring, Kaya continued, pain evident in her voice. But Blackwood came first. Why? What does Blackwood want with a valley? Kaya touched the jade pendant. Spirit Valley holds water that never runs dry, land that grows food in abundance. But Blackwood believes it contains gold. Her eyes met Ethan's. Your brother found the valley with my father's help. He planned to create a refuge there, beyond the reach of men like Blackwood. And Blackwood learned of this plan? Yes, someone betrayed us. Her face hardened. 3 weeks ago, his men attacked our village near Pine Bluff. Many died. Thomas was taken. My father was wounded but escaped with some of our people. I carried the sacred stone, but was separated during the flight. Ethan absorbed this, his mind working through implications. So Blackwood has Thomas, and he wants the stone you're carrying. Yes, without both, he cannot find the valley. And your father? If he lives, he will have gone to the meeting place in the high country, where our people gather in times of danger. Ethan stood, decision made. Then that's where we'll go. First light tomorrow. As darkness fell completely, they retreated inside the cabin. Ethan gave Kaya his bed, making a pallet for himself on the floor near the door, rifle close at hand. Sleep seemed unlikely with his mind churning over revelations about Thomas, but his body demanded rest after the tension of the day. His last conscious thought was of Yellow Creek, not the massacre itself, but the moment before, lowering his rifle in the cave, seeing the woman's eyes widen with hope as he offered escape. A moment of humanity in a day of atrocity. And now, 12 years later, the child from that cave had brought news that Thomas might still be alive. Perhaps there was a kind of justice in that, though Ethan couldn't yet see its shape. He drifted into uneasy sleep, only to jolt awake hours later at the sound of movement outside. His hand closed around his rifle as he rose silently, motioning for Kaya to stay quiet. She was already awake, her body tense with alertness. 3 soft notes of a whippoorwill call drifted through the night, a sound out of place in this terrain. Kaya's expression changed instantly. Apache, she whispered. My brother. Before Ethan could respond, she moved to the window, returning the call with perfect mimicry. 3 notes, then 2 more. A signal. How many? Ethan asked, his voice low. The call signaled 3 warriors. Armed? Always. Ethan considered his options. If these were indeed Kaya's people, fighting would be suicide and unnecessary if they only wanted to retrieve her. But if they sought vengeance for Yellow Creek, for all the Apache deaths he had indirectly caused, I will speak with them, Kaya said, moving toward the door. You stay inside. Not a chance, Ethan countered. They see me as a threat either way. Better to face them directly. He stepped onto the porch, rifle held visibly but pointed downward, a careful balance between defense and provocation. Kaya followed, positioning herself slightly in front of him. Moonlight silvered the landscape, revealing 3 figures emerging from the tree line. The leader was a tall warrior with a red band around his forehead, hawk feathers adorning his long hair. He carried a Winchester rifle, army issue, with practiced ease. Brother, Kaya called softly in English. I am unharmed. The warrior's eyes moved from his sister to Ethan, narrowing when they settled on the white man. Sister, psst, he responded, voice carrying clearly in the still night air. You live with Shadowbringer? I live because of him, Kaya corrected. He cut my bonds and healed my wounds when Rollins left me for dead. The warrior, Dakota, Ethan presumed, advanced several steps, his companions flanking him. His expression darkened. You choose to stay with the one who led soldiers to Yellow Creek, who helped kill our cousins. I choose to stay with the man who saved me, Kaya said firmly. The same man who tried to save Mother and Adsilla at Yellow Creek. The older warrior accompanying Dakota leaned forward, studying Ethan with new interest. She speaks truth? Dakota demanded of Ethan. Ethan lowered his rifle completely, though he kept it in hand. Yes, both parts. I led soldiers to Yellow Creek 12 years ago. I also tried to save your mother and sister. He met the warrior's gaze directly. I've earned both your hatred and her trust, it seems. Dakota dismounted in a single fluid motion, hand moving to the knife at his belt. You think saving one life erases those you helped take? No, Ethan said simply. Nothing erases that. Kaya stepped between them. Brother, there is more. Rollins and his men brought me here deliberately. Blackwood hunts for the sacred stone and believes this man knows of it. Even now, he holds Spirit Walker prisoner. Dakota's hand paused on his knife hilt. Spirit Walker lives? Yes, but as Blackwood's captive. He was taken in the raid on Pine Bluff. Dakota spoke rapidly in Apache to the elder warrior, who dismounted and came forward to examine the jade pendant Kaya wore. How did your brother come to know of Spirit Valley? Dakota demanded, turning back to Ethan. I didn't know he did, Ethan answered honestly. I thought he was dead until yesterday. The elder warrior spoke for the first time, his English heavily accented. Spirit Walker is known to our people. He lived among the band of Running Creek for 2 summers, learning our ways. He was to marry Kaya of the Owl Clan. And Blackwood took him because he knows the way to Spirit Valley? Ethan asked. Yes, Dakota confirmed. But without the sacred stone, the valley remains hidden. That is why Blackwood hunts my sister. The elder warrior spoke again, gesturing toward the eastern horizon where the first hint of dawn had begun to lighten the sky. We must move, Dakota translated. Blackwood's scouts were seen near Cooper's Canyon yesterday. If he learns you are here, he let the implication hang. Ethan looked at Kaya, who nodded slightly. We were already planning to leave, Ethan said, to find your father and the others. Dakota's expression remained guarded. Why would you help us? I'm not helping you, Ethan replied bluntly. I'm helping her and maybe finding some truth about my brother's fate. The Apache warriors exchanged glances. Finally, Dakota nodded. You will come with us, but know this, if you betray us, if you lead Blackwood to our people, I will kill you myself. Fair enough, Ethan said. Give us 5 minutes to gather supplies. As they prepared to depart, Ethan took one last look around the cabin that had been his refuge for 5 years. The solitude he'd built here had been a shield against the world's judgments, against his own memories. Now he was leaving it behind, riding into unknown territory with people who had every reason to mistrust him. Yet something about this journey felt right, like completing a circle begun long ago at Yellow Creek. He secured the last of his provisions, mounted the bay mare that was now his only horse, and nodded to Dakota. Lead the way. As they rode east into the rising sun, Ethan Sullivan, former scout, former soldier, the man once known as Shadowbringer, felt the weight of the past lifting slightly from his shoulders. Ahead lay danger certainly, but also perhaps a chance at redemption. Beside him, Kaya rode tall despite her recent ordeal, face turned toward the future. The boundary between past and future, between enemies and allies, had never seemed so thin. The desert stretched endlessly beneath a merciless sun, heat waves shimmering across red earth. 5 riders moved in single file through a narrow canyon, dust rising from hooves to settle on sweat-dampened clothing. Ethan rode third in line behind Dakota and the elder warrior. Kaya and the youngest Apache brought up the rear. They had traveled for nearly 6 hours, stopping only once to water the horses at a seep spring hidden among rocks. Few words were exchanged. The Apache moved with purpose, following trails invisible to untrained eyes, avoiding exposed ridgelines where silhouettes might be spotted from a distance. Ethan recognized the caution of hunted people. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Dakota raised a hand, signaling a halt. They had reached a box canyon, a dead end to casual observers, but the Apache leader dismounted and led his horse toward what appeared to be a solid rock wall. As they drew closer, Ethan saw the narrow crevice, almost perfectly concealed by shadow and the natural contours of the stone. "We rest here," Dakota said, the first words spoken in hours. Single file, they led their horses through the opening into a hidden grotto. A small spring bubbled up from the ground, feeding a shallow pool surrounded by cottonwoods and willows. The temperature dropped immediately in the shade. Ethan dismounted, muscles stiff from the long ride. He helped Kaya from her horse, noting how she winced slightly as her feet touched the ground. Her wounds were healing, but the journey taxed her still recovering body. "How much farther?" he asked quietly. "To the meeting place, one more day," she replied. "If my father and the others survived, they will be there." Dakota approached, overhearing their conversation. "If Blackwood's scouts found you at your cabin, they will be tracking us now." "Probably," Ethan agreed, "though Rollins isn't the best tracker I've seen. We've been careful to cover our trail." The elder warrior, whose name Ethan had learned was Running Fox, began unloading supplies. The youngest Apache, a boy of perhaps 17 named Nashoda, gathered wood for a small, smokeless fire. Kaya moved to help, but Running Fox shook his head, gesturing for her to sit and rest. She complied, lowering herself to a flat rock near the spring. Ethan settled nearby, using a bandana to wipe trail dust from his face and neck. The cool water was a blessing after the heat. "You still haven't told me how Thomas came to possess knowledge of Spirit Valley," Ethan said, breaking the silence between them. Kaya looked up from the jade pendant she'd been studying. "My father showed him, after Thomas saved me from the slave traders. After he had lived among us for a year, my father believed he could be trusted. The army reported him killed by Apache." "A lie," Kaya said simply. "When Thomas did not return from a scouting mission, Blackwood claimed he had been ambushed by our warriors. A body was found, dressed in his uniform." "I identified that body," Ethan said, bitterness creeping into his voice. "They wouldn't let me see the face, said it was too badly damaged. But the clothing, the signet ring," he gestured to the pendant around her neck. "And that stone, Thomas always wore it." "Thomas created two stones," Kaya confirmed, "the false one to mislead Blackwood, and this one with the true path." "Yes. And you trust me with this knowledge? After Yellow Creek?" Kaya's dark eyes studied him with unexpected intensity. "My mother's last words to me were about you. She said, 'Remember his face.'" He lowered his rifle. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. Small comfort, considering what happened after. "She knew you tried," Kaya said simply. That was enough for her final moment. They lapsed into silence as dusk settled over the hidden canyon. Nashoda kindled a small fire, its flames barely visible but providing enough heat to warm the night air. Dakota and Running Fox spoke in low voices, occasionally gesturing toward the canyon entrance. As the first stars appeared, Ethan found himself seeing the Apache not as enemies, but as people, each with their own story, their own strength. "Your thoughts are loud," Kaya observed, interrupting his reverie. Ethan gave a rueful smile. "Just wondering how Thomas adapted so easily to your world when I spent years seeing only enemies." "Not easily," she corrected. "He made many mistakes. Called our most respected elder grandmother when she was no relation. Used sacred objects without permission." A fond smile touched her lips. "Once he bathed in the men's section of the river while the women were washing clothes downstream." The image of his proper Boston-raised brother committing such faux pas made Ethan chuckle despite himself. "I would have paid good money to see that." "The women threw mud at him," Kaya continued, her own smile widening. "He ran naked through the village, trying to escape." For a moment they shared laughter, a fragile bridge across cultures, across history. Then Dakota approached, his expression serious once more. "We should discuss tomorrow's journey," he said, crouching beside them. "The path to the meeting place crosses open country. We will be vulnerable." Ethan nodded, professional instincts taking over. If Blackwood's scouts are tracking us, they'll expect us to take the most direct route through the high pass. We should consider alternatives. Dakota's eyes narrowed slightly. You know this territory well? I was a scout for 7 years, Ethan replied evenly. Learned every trail, creek, and rabbit path between Fort Apache and the Mexican border. Running Fox joined their circle, his weathered face impassive. There is another way, through Shadow Canyon. Dakota shook his head emphatically. Too dangerous. The canyon floods with even small rains. And there were clouds over the mountains today. What about the eastern ridge, Ethan suggested? Longer, but it offers cover and multiple escape routes if needed. The Apache warriors exchanged glances. Finally, Running Fox nodded. The white man's path is good. We go east. As they finalized plans for the morning departure, Ethan felt Dakota's calculating gaze upon him. The young war chief had accepted his presence out of necessity, but trust was a different matter entirely. One question, Shadowbringer, Dakota said as they finished. If we find your brother alive, where will your loyalty lie? With him or with the blue coats who were once your brothers in arms? The question hung in the air, direct and unavoidable. Ethan considered deflecting, but something in Dakota's steady gaze demanded honesty. Thomas is the only family I have left, he said finally. If he's chosen to stand with your people, then my loyalty is to him. Dakota studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Not acceptance precisely, but acknowledgement of the answer. As the others retired to their bedrolls, Ethan volunteered for first watch, positioning himself near the canyon entrance where he could observe both the approach and the camp itself. The waning moon cast silver light across the landscape, transforming the desert into an otherworldly terrain of shadow and light. An hour into his vigil, soft footsteps approached from behind. Kaya settled beside him, wrapped in a blanket against the desert night's chill. You should be resting, he said without looking away from his watch. As should you, she countered. Yet here we are. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. May I ask something, she finally said. Ask. When they called you Shadowbringer, did it trouble you? Ethan stared into the distance, considering. No, it seemed fitting at the time. I led death to your people's doors. What else would they call me? And now, he sighed, now it feels like a weight I can't put down, a name that follows me no matter how far I ride. Kaya nodded slowly. Names have power. My people believe this. To name something is to know its nature, to hold a piece of its spirit. Then they named me well, Ethan said, voice turning harsh. Death has been my shadow for too long. Perhaps, Kaya's gaze held his, or perhaps the name was prophecy, not judgment. Shadows exist because light exists. One cannot be without the other. Ethan had no response to that. The thought that his blood-earned name might carry a different meaning, might even suggest purpose rather than condemnation, was too foreign to grasp. Your brother found his place between worlds, she continued. Between shadow and light. Perhaps that is the haze path. My brother died for crossing that boundary, Ethan reminded her. Yes. Her eyes reflected the moonlight. Are you afraid of the same fate? The question pierced deeper than he expected. Ethan considered deflecting, but something about this night, this journey, demanded truth. I've never feared death, he said finally. Only dying without purpose. She nodded as if he'd confirmed something she already suspected. Tomorrow we may reach our people. You will stand before my father if he lives. He will ask why Shadowbringer rides with his daughter. Her voice lowered. What will you tell him? Ethan looked away. The truth, I suppose. That I'm trying to find answers about my brother, that I'm trying to, He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. To make amends? She suggested. Is that possible? The question escaped him before he could consider it. A raw, genuine uncertainty he rarely allowed himself to voice. Kaya was quiet for a long moment. My people believe that no action is beyond redemption if the heart truly turns. But redemption demands more than regret. It requires service, sacrifice. I'm not looking for forgiveness, Ethan said stiffly. No, she studied him. Then what do you seek on this journey? The question penetrated deeper than he expected. What was he seeking? Vengeance for Thomas? Truth about his brother's hidden life? Or something more elusive, peace perhaps, from the ghost that had haunted him since Yellow Creek? I don't know, he admitted finally. Maybe just to set something right for once. Kaya accepted this with a small nod. That is a beginning. She rose gracefully, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Sleep, Ethan Hayes. Tomorrow will test us all. After she had gone, Ethan remained at his post, her words echoing. A beginning. As if his life until now had been mere prelude, and the true journey was only just commencing. They broke camp before dawn, moving with practiced efficiency through the narrow cleft and back into open country. Dakota led them east as planned, following game trails that wound through increasingly rugged terrain. The rising sun cast long shadows as they climbed higher into the foothills, the landscape changing from desert scrub to scattered juniper and pine. Twice they stopped to scout ahead, Nashota scaling high points to survey the land before them. The third time he returned with tension evident in his young face. Soldiers, he reported in Apache, which Kaya translated quietly for Ethan. A patrol, 8 men moving along the southern ridge. Dakota turned to Ethan, suspicion flaring. Blackwood's men? Ethan considered. Regular patrols don't venture this far into Apache territory without cause. Can we see their insignia? Nashota shook his head. Too distant, but they follow the trail toward your cabin. Looking for us then, Ethan concluded. If they're following standard patrol routes, they'll sweep west after the ridge, then circle back toward Fort Apache. We need to stay north and keep to higher ground. Dakota's eyes narrowed. And if this leads us into an ambush? Then you can kill me first, Ethan said flatly. But it won't. I have no more love for Blackwood than you do. After a moment's deliberation, Dakota nodded. We go your way, but remember my promise. They proceeded as Ethan had suggested, moving carefully through rocky terrain where horses struggled to find footing. The going was slower than any of them liked, but they encountered no soldiers, and by midday had reached a vantage point that allowed them to see the patrol in the distance moving exactly as Ethan had predicted. They follow patterns, Ethan explained when he caught Dakota's evaluating gaze. Most officers lack imagination. Blackwood especially relies on intimidation, not cleverness. You know him well, the Apache leader asked. Well enough. Ethan's mouth set in a grim line. He was a lieutenant when I was court-martialed. Testified against me. Said I'd gone native. Used those exact words. And had you? Ethan looked at Kaya, then back to Dakota. No, not then. I just couldn't stomach the killing anymore. Well, they continued northward as the day waned, the landscape gradually changing from open foothills to more densely forested slopes as they gained elevation. By late afternoon, Ethan recognized they were entering the traditional territory of the Owl clan, places most white settlers avoided for fear of Apache reprisals. As dusk approached, Running Fox led them down a narrow trail into a sheltered valley. Ahead, a thin column of smoke rose from a cluster of wickiups nestled against a cliff face. Sentries appeared on the ridges above, calling down to the encampment. Our people, Kaya said softly, relief evident in her voice. They rode into the small encampment as the last light faded. Perhaps 30 Apache had gathered here, mostly women, children, and elders, with a handful of warriors standing guard. Ethan felt the weight of suspicious stares as he dismounted, keeping close to Kaya and Dakota. Women rushed forward to greet Kaya, embracing her with cries of relief. Children watched from a distance, their dark eyes wide at the sight of a white man in their midst. Several warriors approached Dakota, speaking rapidly in their language. Ethan stood awkwardly to one side, a living reminder of all these people had suffered at the hands of men who looked just like him. Then Kaya returned to his side, taking his arm. Come, she said quietly. My father wishes to see you. She led him to a wickiup larger than the others, positioned against the cliff wall. Inside, lying on a pallet of blankets, was an elderly Apache man. His breathing was labored, face gaunt with illness or injury, but his eyes, when they opened at their approach, were sharp and alert. Father, Kaya whispered, kneeling beside him. Chief Red Cloud reached a trembling hand to touch his daughter's face. He spoke weakly in Apache, tears gathering in his eyes. He thought you were dead, Dakota translated, having followed them inside. We found signs of struggle near Cooper's Canyon. Blood on the rocks. The chief's gaze shifted to Ethan, recognition and wariness flickering in his dark eyes. He spoke again, voice stronger. He asked why Shadowbringer walks with his children, Dakota said. He asks if you have come to finish what was started at Yellow Creek. Ethan removed his hat, a gesture of respect. Tell him I've come seeking truth about my brother, about Blackwood, about the sacred stone. When Dakota translated, Red Cloud's expression changed to one of surprise, then calculation. He responded at length, gaze never leaving Ethan's face. He says your brother was a friend to our people, Kaya translated. That spirit walker saw the future clearly, that our peoples must find common ground or both will perish. He carried the knowledge of Spirit Valley not to betray us, but to create a place of safety beyond the reach of men like Blackwood. Ethan absorbed this, the image of his brother transforming further in his mind. Red Cloud spoke again, slower now as fatigue claimed him. Betrayed by someone in your military, Kaya continued softly. Blackwood discovered his plan to help our people, took him prisoner after attacking our village. The confirmation hit Ethan like a physical blow. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it stated so plainly made the betrayal fresh again. The sacred stone, Dakota prompted, bringing the conversation back to immediate concerns. Father, does Thomas still have the false one? Red Cloud nodded weakly, then spoke again, gesturing toward his daughter. He says Blackwood does not know there are two stones, Kaya translated. Thomas wears the false one still. Blackwood believes it is genuine, but grows suspicious as it leads nowhere. That is why he hunts me now. He believes I may know the true way. And the real stone, Ethan asked, looking at the jade pendant around Kaya's neck. It shows the true path to Spirit Valley, she confirmed, but only when combined with the ancient song that has been passed through generations of our people. Red Cloud spoke again, reaching for Ethan's hand. Surprised, Ethan allowed the old chief to take it, feeling the dry, papery skin against his own calloused palm. He says your brother's spirit has guided you here, Kaya translated, her voice catching slightly. That perhaps the circle begins to close. The chief released Ethan's hand and spoke to his son more urgently now. Dakota listened intently, occasionally asking questions. Finally, he nodded and turned to Ethan. Our scouts report Blackwood has gathered a large force at Fort Apache, 50 soldiers plus civilian volunteers. They prepared to move against the remaining free bands of our people. His eyes hardened. We believe they have learned of this place, that they will come soon. How? Ethan asked. Who could have told them? Rollins, Kaya suggested. He has worked for Blackwood for years. They may have followed him to your cabin, then tracked us here. Dakota nodded grimly. We must move our people to Spirit Valley immediately. Ethan looked at Red Cloud, whose eyes had closed with exhaustion. What about your father? He can't travel in his condition. A small group will remain with him, Dakota said. The rest of us leave at dawn, with the stone and with you, Hayes, if you're still committed to this path. The question wasn't just about physical travel, and Ethan knew it. This was the moment to commit fully to their cause, or to walk away, to choose a side in the conflict he'd been avoiding for years. I'm committed, he said firmly. Blackwood has answers I need, and debts to pay to my brother, and to your people. Dakota studied him for a long moment, then nodded at last. Then rest. Tomorrow we ride for Spirit Valley. Outside the shelter, stars had emerged in a cloudless sky, brilliant and indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath them. Ethan found a place to sit against a boulder, watching as activity continued throughout the encampment. Women preparing food, warriors checking weapons, children being ushered to bed. Later, as the camp settled into nighttime quiet, Kaya joined him beneath the stars, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. How is he? Ethan asked. Dying, she said simply. A bullet wound from the attack never healed properly. Infection has set in. She looked up at the stars. He has held on only to ensure our people reach Spirit Valley safely. And after that? Ethan asked quietly. Then leadership falls to Dakota, she said, and to me, as keeper of the sacred stone. Your people accept female leaders? A small smile touched her lips. We are not like white men in this way. Women have always helped guide the Owl clan. My mother was a medicine woman and sat on the council of elders. I was trained to follow her path. They fell silent, the night sounds of the forest filling the space between them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its haunting cry echoing off canyon walls. What was she like? Ethan asked suddenly. The woman Thomas loved. You. Kaya seemed surprised by the question. I am as you see me, she said simply. I was raised to be a healer, to know the plants and their purposes, to help deliver babies into the world. And Thomas? What did he see in you? She considered this, her expression softening. He said I reminded him of someone from his childhood, a teacher who showed him kindness when others mocked his gentle nature. The description struck a chord in Ethan's memory. Miss Abernathy, Thomas's first school teacher in Boston, who had encouraged his love of plants and animals when their father had tried to force him into more manly pursuits. He also said I made him laugh, Kaya continued, a fond smile playing at her lips. That I didn't treat him differently because he was white. And you, what did you see in my brother? Courage, she said without hesitation. Not the kind that comes from strength or skill with weapons, but from here. She touched her heart. He risked everything to help people not his own. That is rare among any tribe. It is, Ethan agreed, thinking of the boy who had once rescued injured birds and confronted bullies twice his size. Perhaps Thomas hadn't changed so much after all, just found a place where his natural compassion could flourish. Thank you, he said quietly, for telling me about him. Kaya nodded. Sleep now. Dawn comes quickly. But sleep eluded Ethan long into the night, his mind filled with images of what might have been. Thomas alive, building a life with this remarkable woman, creating a bridge between their peoples that might have prevented so much bloodshed. They departed at first light, a column of 30 Apache moving swiftly through the forested highlands. Women carried children too young to walk. Elders who could not ride were supported on travois pulled by horses. Warriors flanked the group, constantly scouting for signs of pursuit. Red Cloud remained behind with a small honor guard, his blessing following them as they journeyed toward Spirit Valley. Ethan rode beside Kaya near the front of the column, acutely aware of the responsibility they all shared, to reach the valley before Blackwood's forces could intercept them. How far to Spirit Valley? He asked as they paused to rest the horses at midday. 2 days' hard ride, Kaya replied, studying the mountains ahead. We must cross Thunder Pass, then follow the river canyon to the hidden entrance. And once there, the valley is defensible. One narrow entrance, high walls, water and food within. We could withstand a siege for months if necessary. Ethan nodded, assessing their situation with a scout's practiced eye. If Blackwood is gathering men at Fort Apache, he'll need at least a day to organize. Another 2 days to reach this region if he pushes hard. That gives us a narrow window to reach the valley and prepare defenses. Kaya touched the jade pendant. With this, we can find the true path. Without it, Blackwood could search for years and never find the entrance. Unless he forces Thomas to talk, Ethan said grimly. Spirit Walker would die before betraying our people, Kaya said with quiet certainty. Then seeing Ethan's expression, she added more gently, but yes, we must assume Blackwood will try. Another reason to hurry. They continued their journey through the afternoon, making good progress despite the difficult terrain. As evening approached, they made camp in a sheltered ravine, keeping fires small and well hidden to avoid detection. After a simple meal, Dakota called a council of the remaining warriors, 7 men, including himself and Running Fox. To Ethan's surprise, Kaya was included, taking a place of honor in the circle. More surprising still, Dakota gestured for Ethan to join them. We must discuss our plans should Blackwood find us before we reach Spirit Valley, Dakota began. Hayes, you know his tactics. How will he come at us? Ethan considered carefully. Blackwood prefers overwhelming force. He'll bring as many men as he can muster, soldiers and civilian volunteers. He'll have scouts ranging ahead to find our trail. He drew a rough map in the dirt. If he picks up our trail tomorrow, he'll likely try to cut us off before we reach Thunder Pass. The terrain there favors a larger force. Running Fox nodded agreement. The pass is narrow, good for defense, but if they reach it before us, we would be trapped in the lowlands, Dakota finished, caught in open ground. What about splitting our group? Kaya suggested. The women, children, and elders continued directly while warriors create a diversion. Ethan shook his head. Blackwood would recognize that tactic. He'd send a token force after the diversion while his main body continued pursuing the non-combatants. The council fell silent, each warrior considering options. Finally, Ethan spoke again. There may be another way, he said slowly. Not splitting the group, but sending a small party ahead. Someone who knows the way to Spirit Valley and can lead our people there. Meanwhile, a few of us backtrack, creating signs of a larger group changing direction. A false trail, Running Fox nodded approvingly. Make Blackwood believe we have all gone another way. Exactly, Ethan confirmed. But it would need to be convincing. Multiple horse tracks, campfire remnants, deliberate signs left for his scouts to find. Dakota studied the map Ethan had drawn. Who would go ahead with our people? Kaya, Ethan said immediately. She knows the way and carries the sacred stone. And you as war chief. Most of the warriors should stay to protect the main group. And who creates this false trail? Dakota asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Me, Ethan said, and perhaps one or two others who know how to mislead army trackers. Silence fell over the circle as they considered his proposal. Finally, Running Fox spoke. I will go with Shadowbringer, he said. I know this land as well as any living Apache. Nashota, the youngest warrior, straightened his shoulders. And I will go. 3 is better than 2 for making many tracks. Dakota looked at each volunteer, then at Ethan. You would risk your life to give our people time to reach safety? Yes, Ethan said simply. Why? The question held genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. Ethan met the war chief's gaze. Because Thomas would do the same. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I have a score to settle with Blackwood that's 12 years overdue. After a long moment, Dakota nodded. Very well. At dawn, we separate. Kaya will lead our people to Spirit Valley. You 3 will create the false trail leading southwest toward the flatlands. If you succeed in drawing Blackwood, come to Spirit Valley by the western approach. Kaya will show you the signs to look for. The council concluded with details of the plan, what supplies each group would take, signals they might use if they needed to communicate, rendezvous points if the worst happened. As the others dispersed to their bedrolls, Kaya remained seated beside Ethan. You didn't have to volunteer, she said quietly. This isn't your fight. Maybe it is, he replied. Maybe it has been since Yellow Creek. Her expression grew troubled. If Blackwood captures you, he won't, Ethan assured her. I spent 7 years learning how to disappear in this country. Besides, he added with grim humor, Running Fox and Nashota wouldn't let me surrender even if I wanted to. True, she acknowledged, but her concern remained evident. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of tomorrow's separation hanging between them. There's something I need to tell you, Kaya said finally, her voice lower. Something my father shared with me tonight, about the pendant. Ethan waited, sensing the importance of what was to come. The sacred stone has been passed down through generations of our people, she explained, touching the jade pendant. It is said to choose its guardian in times of great change. And it's chosen you, Ethan observed. For now, she agreed, but my father believes its purpose is not yet fulfilled, that it is meant for another. Who? Kaya's dark eyes met his directly. The one who stands between worlds, between shadow and light. Ethan frowned, not understanding. You mean Thomas? Perhaps, she said, or perhaps you. The suggestion took him aback. That's not possible. I've done nothing to deserve such trust. The stone doesn't choose based on past deeds, but on what is yet to come, Kaya said. My father believes your path and the stones are intertwined, that you were drawn here for a purpose greater than finding your brother. Ethan shook his head, uncomfortable with the weight of expectation her words carried. I'm just a disgraced scout trying to make one thing right before the end. We shall see, Kaya said, rising to her feet. Rest now. Tomorrow's journey will test us all. As she walked away, Ethan found himself touching the scar tissue of his right hand, the physical reminder of Yellow Creek and all that had followed. The thought that he might be part of some larger purpose, some destiny beyond his own seeking, seemed almost laughable. And yet hadn't every step since Rollins brought Kaya to his cabin felt guided by something beyond coincidence? Thomas alive, the sacred stone, Spirit Valley, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed a week ago. Perhaps Kaya was right. Perhaps there was more to this journey than he yet understood. With that unsettling thought, Ethan wrapped himself in his blanket and sought what rest he could before dawn brought its new challenges. They parted ways as the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky with pale gold. Kaya led the main group, 23 women, children, and elders, along with Dakota and 3 warriors, northward toward Thunder Pass and the promise of Spirit Valley beyond. Before they separated, Kaya approached Ethan one last time. "Remember," she said, "if you reach Spirit Valley by the western approach, look for the stone formation that resembles a sleeping bear. The entrance is behind it, concealed by brush." Ethan nodded, committing the information to memory. "We'll be there in 3 days if all goes well. 4 at the most." She hesitated, then reached up to touch his face briefly, a gesture of connection that spoke volumes in its simplicity. "May the spirits guide your path, Ethan Hayes." "And yours," he replied, unexpectedly moved. Then she was gone, leading her people towards safety, while Ethan, Running Fox, and Nashoda prepared for their more dangerous task. They worked with methodical precision, creating clear signs of a large group moving southwest, multiple horse tracks, a hastily abandoned campsite with food left behind, broken branches, even an intentionally lost blanket. Any competent tracker would believe the entire Apache band had fled in that direction, perhaps heading for the Mexican border. By mid-morning, they were moving at a steady pace through the foothills, cutting a clear trail that Blackwood's scouts would be certain to find. They took turns riding double, leading spare horses to create the impression of greater numbers. "How long before they find this trail?" Nashoda asked as they paused to create another false campsite. "Soon," Ethan replied, surveying their handiwork. "Blackwood will have scouts ranging ahead of his main force. If they're within 20 miles, they'll pick up our sign by nightfall." Running Fox nodded agreement. "Then we must be ready for them. Make the trap convincing." The trap was the riskiest part of their plan. To ensure Blackwood committed his full force to this false trail, they needed him to believe he was close to capturing his quarry. That meant allowing his scouts to spot them, at a distance, just enough to confirm the Apache band was indeed traveling this route. As afternoon waned, they found the perfect location, a valley with good visibility but multiple escape routes through the surrounding hills. They made camp conspicuously, building a larger fire than necessary, hanging blankets to dry as if the entire group rested here. "Now we wait," Ethan said, positioning himself where he could observe the approaches to their camp. "Blackwood's scouts should reach this area by dusk." Running Fox settled beside him, his weathered face impassive. "You are certain they will come?" "As certain as one can be in war," Ethan replied. "Blackwood wants the stone and Kaya too badly to ignore such an obvious trail." The older warrior studied him with shrewd eyes. "You know this man well." "I thought I did once," Ethan admitted. "We served together before Yellow Creek. He was ambitious, ruthless, but an effective officer." "What changed?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Yellow Creek changed everything. I refused to lead more massacres. Blackwood saw my defiance as weakness, or worse, as betrayal of the uniform." "And your brother? How did he come to oppose Blackwood?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "Thomas and we lost touch after my court-martial. His letters grew infrequent, then stopped entirely. I assumed he was ashamed of my disgrace." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Now I wonder if he was already planning his own departure from the army." Running Fox nodded slowly. "Spirit Walker spoke of you often, with sadness, but also respect. He said you taught him to see the truth behind appearances." The words touched something deep in Ethan, the knowledge that, despite everything, Thomas had remembered him with something other than shame. Their conversation ended abruptly as Nashoda approached from his lookout position, moving with silent urgency. "Riders," he reported in a whisper. "From the east. 4 men." "Scouts," Ethan confirmed. "Right on schedule." They retreated to the edge of their camp, concealing themselves while leaving the fire burning brightly. Through his field glass, Ethan observed the approaching riders, cavalry uniforms, moving with the caution of men in hostile territory. "They've spotted our camp," he murmured. "They'll report back to Blackwood now." As predicted, after a brief observation, the scouts withdrew, riding east at a quick pace. "What now?" Nashoda asked. "Now we wait for darkness," Ethan replied. "Then we slip away, leaving signs that our people departed in haste toward the southwest. By morning, Blackwood's main force will follow, believing they're just hours behind the entire band. And we? Running Fox asked. We circle back north, Ethan said, taking the long way to Spirit Valley while Blackwood chases ghosts in the wrong direction. As darkness fell, they executed the plan, leaving the fire to burn down naturally, creating signs of hasty departure, then slipping away through a rocky draw that left minimal tracks. They rode through the night, pushing their horses as hard as they dared in the difficult terrain. By dawn, they had circled far to the west, effectively flanking the route Blackwood would take in pursuit of their false trail. From a high ridge, they caught sight of dust in the distance, a large group of riders moving southwest with purpose. Blackwood, Ethan confirmed through his field glass. At least 40 men. The trap is sprung. Running Fox allowed himself a rare smile. How long before he realizes his mistake? A day, perhaps two, if we're lucky, Ethan estimated. Once he finds no fresh sign, he'll double back. By then, Kaya and the others should have reached Spirit Valley. And us? Nashota asked. Ethan studied the terrain ahead, calculating distances and risks. We make for the western approach to Spirit Valley. 3 days hard ride if we push through. They traveled north and east, keeping to high ground where possible, always watching for signs of pursuit. The land grew increasingly rugged as they approached the mountain range that sheltered Spirit Valley. Game trails narrowed, sometimes disappearing entirely as they navigated rocky slopes and deep ravines. On the second day, disaster struck. As they forded a swift-running creek, Nashota's horse lost its footing on slick stones. The young warrior was thrown, his leg caught beneath the panicked animals as it thrashed in the water. By the time Ethan and Running Fox pulled him to safety, the damage was done. A broken leg, the bone visibly displaced beneath the skin. I can't ride, Nashota said through gritted teeth as they made camp to assess his injury. You must leave me. Not a chance, Ethan replied, examining the break. But we need to set this bone properly, and you'll need time to recover before we can move on. Running Fox gathered wood for a fire, his expression grave. This changes our plans. Yes, Ethan agreed. We can't move quickly with an injured man, and we can't leave him behind. The old warrior considered their options. There is a place nearby, old hunting camp of my father's people. Cave in the hillside, hidden from view. Safe place to rest. How far? Half-day's ride. Gentle path for injured man. Ethan nodded decisively. We'll make a travois for Nashota. Get him to this cave, then reassess. They worked together to set the young warrior's leg, using branches as splints and strips of blanket for binding. Nashota endured the painful process stoically, refusing the whiskey Ethan offered from his canteen. Apache warrior does not dull pain, he explained, though sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort of control. Pain is teacher. Pain is also a distraction, Ethan countered, but respected the young man's choice. By midday, they had fashioned a travois and secured Nashota upon it. Their progress slowed to a walking pace, each jolt and bump drawing a sharp intake of breath from the injured warrior, despite his attempts to remain silent. They reached the cave Running Fox had described as afternoon shadows lengthened across the land. It was well hidden indeed, a narrow opening in a rock face, concealed by a stand of juniper trees. Inside, the space widened into a comfortable shelter, with evidence of past use. Stone-lined fire pit, stacked firewood even crude sleeping platforms built against one wall. My father's father used this place, Running Fox explained, as they settled Nashota inside. Good hunting grounds nearby. Water from spring at back of cave. Ethan assessed their situation with growing concern. This delay could prove costly. Every day spent here was another day Blackwood had to realize he'd been deceived, to double back and begin searching in the right direction. After ensuring Nashota was as comfortable as possible, he stepped outside with Running Fox to discuss their options. I should continue to Spirit Valley, Ethan said. Warn them that our plan may have failed. You stay with Nashota until he can travel. The old warrior shook his head. Too dangerous for one man alone. Blackwood's scouts will be searching once they realize their mistake. I can evade them, Ethan insisted. I know their methods, their blind spots. Running Fox studied him with penetrating eyes. There is another reason you wish to go alone. It wasn't a question. Ethan met the older man's gaze directly. Yes, he admitted. Thomas, if Blackwood realizes he's been tricked, He may take his frustration out on his prisoner. I need to reach Spirit Valley, then find a way to free my brother before that happens. Running Fox considered this, his weathered face revealing nothing. Finally, he nodded once. You will go at dawn, he decided. I will stay with Nashota. When he can travel, we will follow. Thank you, Ethan said simply. That night, as they sat around a small fire in the cave, Running Fox shared stories of Spirit Valley, of its hidden wonders, its sacred places, the ancient paintings that adorn certain rock faces deep within its confines. Our people have gone there in times of trouble for many generations, he explained. When drought comes, when enemies are too strong, when disease stalks our camps, the valley provides. And now it may provide sanctuary from Blackwood, Ethan observed. Running Fox nodded. If the sacred stone guides the way. You've seen this valley? Ethan asked. Once, as a young man, the warrior confirmed. My grandfather took me there to pray for vision before my first war party. His eyes grew distant with memory. I saw many things in that sacred place. The spirits speak more clearly there. What did they tell you? Ethan couldn't help asking. A faint smile crossed the old man's face. That one day I would guide an enemy who was not an enemy to the valley's heart. His gaze settled on Ethan. Now I understand that vision. The words sent an unexpected shiver down Ethan's spine. First Kaya's suggestion about the sacred stone choosing him. Now this prophecy from decades past. It was too much to be coincidence, yet too strange to be easily accepted. Get some rest, Running Fox advised, seeing Ethan's discomfort. Tomorrow's journey will test your strength. As Ethan settled into his blankets, sleep proved elusive. His mind churned with all he had learned, all that might yet come to pass. Thomas a prisoner, Blackwood pursuing innocent people for his own ambition, Spirit Valley waiting like a promise on the horizon, and somewhere in that tangled web of past and future, a path to redemption he had never sought, but now found himself walking nonetheless. Dawn broke crisp and clear over the mountain foothills. Ethan stood at the cave entrance, watching as the first golden rays touched the peaks ahead. Behind him, Running Fox prepared a small meal while Nashota slept fitfully, his broken leg propped on folded blankets. The western approach will be watched, Running Fox said as he handed Ethan a portion of dried meat and berries. Blackwood will have scouts ranging wide once he discovers our deception. Ethan nodded, chewing thoughtfully. I'll stay high, keep to the ridgelines where possible. Less chance of encountering patrols. A longer journey, but safer, the old warrior agreed. He reached into a small leather pouch at his waist and withdrew a stone arrowhead on a leather cord. Take this. If you reach our people, show it to the sentries. They will know you come with my blessing. Ethan accepted the token, slipping it around his neck alongside his army identification tags. Thank you. When Nashota can travel, we will follow, Running Fox continued. 3 days, perhaps 4. I'll tell them to expect you, Ethan promised. He knelt beside the sleeping Nashota, checking the splints on his leg. The young warrior's eyes fluttered open. Rest, Ethan told him. Heal quickly. Your people will need every warrior when Blackwood comes. Nashota gripped Ethan's wrist with surprising strength. Find Spirit Valley. Protect our people. I will, Ethan assured him, struck by the trust in the young man's eyes. How quickly things had changed, from enemies to allies, in the space of a few days. Outside, he made a final check of his gear. Winchester rifle with 30 rounds, Colt revolver, hunting knife, 3 days' worth of provisions, and a canteen full of fresh spring water. His bay mare was rested and fed, ready for the hard journey ahead. Running Fox joined him as he mounted. Follow the setting sun for 1 day, the older man instructed, then north toward the Twin Peaks. Between them lies the western entrance to Spirit Valley. The Sleeping Bear Rock Formation, Ethan recalled Kaya's instructions. Yes, look for it at the base of the northern peak. The path is hidden, but a careful eye will find it. With a final nod of farewell, Ethan turned his horse westward and rode from the cave, the morning sun warm on his back. He set a steady pace, knowing he needed to conserve his mount's strength for the difficult terrain ahead. The day passed without incident as he traveled through increasingly rugged country, climbing steadily into the foothills of the mountain range that sheltered Spirit Valley. By late afternoon, he had reached a high ridge that offered views in all directions. To the south, a plume of dust betrayed the movement of a large group. too large to be anything but Blackwood's main force. They were heading east, directly toward Thunder Pass. The deception had failed. Blackwood had somehow discovered their true destination, and the race to Spirit Valley had become desperate. Pushing his horse harder, Ethan rode until dusk made further travel dangerous. He made a cold camp in a rocky draw, allowing no fire that might betray his position. As he chewed on jerky and sipped water, he calculated distances and routes in his mind. If he rode through part of the night and resumed at first light, he might reach the Twin Peaks by late afternoon tomorrow. From there, if he could find the western entrance to Spirit Valley, sleep came in fits and starts, his dreams haunted by faces. Thomas, wounded and calling for help. Kaya, her dark eyes filled with accusation. The Apache woman from Yellow Creek, shielding her child as bullets tore through the cave. He woke before dawn, stiff from the cold and the hard ground. After checking his horse and gear, he mounted and continued west by starlight, using the constellation Ursa Major as his guide. The first hint of dawn found him traversing a high saddle between mountain ridges, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous with each mile. His mare picked her way carefully across loose shale slopes and narrow game trails, sure-footed but clearly tiring. By midday, the Twin Peaks Running Fox had described came into view, two sharp granite spires thrusting skyward like sentinels. Between them lay a forested valley, seemingly impenetrable from this distance. Ethan paused to rest his horse and study the terrain ahead. Through his field glass, he scanned the approaches to the valley, looking for signs of Apache sentries or, worse, Blackwood's scouts. The landscape appeared deserted, but experience had taught him that appearance rarely matched reality in Apache territory. He had begun his descent toward the valley floor when the crack of a rifle shot echoed across the canyon. His horse reared in alarm as a bullet struck rock just feet away, showering him with stone fragments. Reacting instinctively, Ethan slid from the saddle, pulling his rifle free as he dropped behind a boulder. A second shot rang out, closer this time. Peering cautiously around his cover, he spotted the shooter, a cavalry scout positioned on a ridge about 300 yards distant, one of Blackwood's men, no doubt. The question was whether he was alone or part of a larger patrol. The scout fired again, the bullet whining off stone inches from Ethan's head. 3 shots in quick succession, a signal to others nearby. Not alone then, Ethan assessed his options. He could return fire, possibly eliminate the immediate threat, but that would only confirm his position to any other scouts in the area. Better to withdraw and find another approach to the valley. Keeping low, he worked his way back to his nervous mount, using the boulder for cover. As he prepared to remount and retreat the way he had come, the distinctive war cry of Apache warriors echoed across the canyon. The scout on the ridge suddenly jerked upright, clutching at an arrow protruding from his shoulder. 2 more arrows followed in quick succession, driving him back and out of Ethan's sight. From the rocks above and to Ethan's left, 3 Apache warriors appeared, moving with the fluid grace of men perfectly adapted to this terrain. They approached cautiously, bows drawn and aimed at his chest. "I am friend to Kaya, daughter of Red Cloud," Ethan called in English, slowly raising his hands to show he was no threat. "Running Fox sent me to find Spirit Valley." The warriors hesitated, exchanging glances. One stepped forward, a tall man with a face scarred by smallpox and a single eagle feather in his hair. "Shadowbringer," he said in heavily accented English. "Why you come alone?" "Nashota was injured," Ethan explained. "Running Fox stayed with him. I came ahead to warn your people. Blackwood knows about Spirit Valley. He's coming with many soldiers." The warrior studied him with narrowed eyes, clearly weighing the truth of his words. Remembering Running Fox's gift, Ethan slowly reached for the arrowhead pendant around his neck. "Running Fox gave me this," he said, holding it out, "to show I come with his blessing." The warrior inspected the token, his expression softening slightly. "Old Fox's sign," he acknowledged. "Where injured ones?" "A cave, 1 day's ride southwest of here. Nashota broke his leg crossing a creek. They will follow when he can travel." After a brief consultation in Apache with his companions, the scarred warrior nodded. "You come, but we watch close." The soldier on the ridge, Ethan gestured toward where the scout had been hit. "Was he alone?" "No, 3 more down canyon. We killed 2. One had escaped on horse." That meant Blackwood would soon know Ethan's position, and that Apache warriors were guarding the western approach to the valley. Time was running short. "Take me to your people," Ethan urged. "I must speak with Dakota and Kaya." Under the watchful eyes of the Apache sentries, Ethan remounted and followed them along a nearly invisible trail that wound through the dense forest between the twin peaks. After an hour of difficult travel, they reached what appeared to be a solid rock wall covered with brush and small trees. The lead warrior dismounted and moved confidently to a particular section of the wall. Pulling aside a carefully arranged screen of branches, he revealed a narrow cleft in the rock, just wide enough for a horse and rider to pass through single file. "Spirit Valley," he said simply, gesturing for Ethan to follow. Leading his mare, Ethan entered the hidden passage. It twisted sharply several times, the walls so close in places that his shoulders brushed rock on both sides. Then, abruptly, the passage widened, and he emerged into a sight that took his breath away. Spirit Valley opened before him, a hidden paradise with clear streams, lush meadows, and in the distance, a serene lake reflecting the blue sky. The Apache had made their home here, with wickiups clustered throughout the valley. "It's beautiful," Ethan murmured, understanding why this place was sacred, not for gold, but as a sanctuary where life could flourish undisturbed. The sentries led him toward the largest cluster of dwellings near the lake. As they approached, people emerged to watch, women pausing in their work, children staring with wide warriors reaching instinctively for weapons at the sight of a white man in their midst. Dakota appeared from one of the larger wickiups, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness as he recognized Ethan. "Hayes," he acknowledged, "where are Running Fox and Nashota?" Ethan quickly explained the accident and their change of plans. As he spoke, Kaya emerged from the same dwelling, her face lighting with relief at the sight of him. "You're alive," she said, stepping forward. "We feared the worst when you didn't arrive as planned." "Barely," Ethan replied. "Blackwood's scouts nearly found me on the approach, and I have worse news. I believe he's discovered your true destination. I saw a large force heading east yesterday, directly toward Thunder Pass." Dakota's expression hardened. "How many?" "At least 40 riders, soldiers and civilians both." The war chief turned to his warriors, issuing rapid orders in Apache. Men moved with purpose, gathering weapons, preparing defenses. "Come," Kaya said, taking Ethan's arm. "You must rest, eat. Then we will make plans." She led him to a small wickiup near the central fire. Inside, she offered him water from a clay jar and a portion of stew kept warm by the coals. As he ate his first hot meal in days, she studied him with concern. "You pushed yourself hard to reach us," she observed. "Had to," Ethan said between mouthfuls. "Once I saw Blackwood's force changing direction, I knew time was short." "And now? Now we prepare," he said grimly. "How defensible is this valley?" "Very. There are only two entrances, the western passage you came through and the main entrance near Thunder Pass. Both are narrow, easily guarded." "Good. Blackwood will likely focus on the main entrance, especially if he believes that's the route you took." Kaya nodded agreement. "Dakota has positioned our strongest warriors there already. The women and children are preparing the cave shelters higher up the valley walls in case fighting reaches the valley floor." "Smart," Ethan approved. "What about supplies? How long could you withstand a siege?" "Months, if necessary. The valley provides game, fish, and wild plants. The lake never runs dry, even in the hottest summers." "And Thomas?" Ethan asked, the question he'd been holding back. "Any word of my brother?" Kaya's expression softened with sympathy. "Nothing certain. But one of our hunters reported seeing a prisoner being escorted by soldiers near Thunder Pass 2 days ago. A white man with long hair, dressed in Apache clothing." Hope surged in Ethan's chest. Was he injured? The hunter was too distant to see clearly, but the man walked on his own between two mounted soldiers. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thomas was alive and apparently nearby. If Blackwood was bringing him to the valley, it confirmed what Kaya had said, that Thomas possessed knowledge Blackwood needed, even if the map he carried was false. "We need to rescue him," Ethan said decisively. "Yes," Kaya agreed, "but how if he's with Blackwood's main force?" Before Ethan could respond, Dakota entered the wickiup, his expression grave. "Scouts report soldiers at Thunder Pass," he announced without preamble. Many men moving toward the valley entrance. They will reach it by nightfall. Ethan rose, energy returning despite his exhaustion. How many warriors can you field? 20, Dakota replied. Most young, inexperienced. Our strongest bands were scattered by Blackwood's earlier attacks. 20 against 40, Ethan calculated. Poor odds in open battle. We do not fight in the open, Dakota said with grim pride. We know this land, they do not. True, Ethan acknowledged, but Blackwood isn't a fool. He'll expect ambushes, traps. What do you suggest? Kaya asked. Ethan considered, his military training asserting itself. We need to divide their force, draw some away from the main entrance, thin their numbers before they reach the valley proper. How? Dakota pressed. We need a diversion, Ethan said. I'll lead a small group to draw away as many of Blackwood's men as possible. Dakota nodded, understanding immediately. A good strategy. Your knowledge of army tactics will be crucial. No, Kaya objected immediately. It's too dangerous. Blackwood would show no mercy if he captured you. Precisely why it will work, Ethan countered. He wants me almost as much as he wants you in the stone. If he believes I'm leading an Apache war party, he'll commit significant forces to the pursuit. Dakota considered the proposal, his tactical mind weighing risks against potential rewards. Finally, he nodded. It may work, but you will need warriors with you, men who know every trail, every hiding place. 3 would be enough, Ethan said. Any more increases the risk of detection before we want to be seen. I will choose them, Dakota decided. Men who speak some English in case quick communication is needed. He turned to leave, then paused. If this plan succeeds, Shadowbringer, my people will remember your courage. After Dakota departed, Kaya rounded on Ethan, her dark eyes flashing with anger and concern. This is foolishness, she said sharply. You risk everything. For what? People who once called you enemy? For Thomas, Ethan corrected gently. And yes, for your people, for a chance to make right some small part of the wrong done at Yellow Creek. Her anger faltered. There are other ways to find redemption. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but this is the path before me now. They fell silent, the weight of what was to come hanging between them. Outside, they could hear the camp mobilizing, warriors preparing weapons, women gathering children, elders offering prayers for protection. There's something else, Ethan said finally. Something I need to ask you. Kaya waited, her expression softening. The woman at Yellow Creek, your mother. What was her name? The question clearly surprised her. Morning Star, she answered. She was a medicine woman like her mother before her. Why do you ask? For 12 years, she's been a ghost in my dreams, Ethan explained. A woman with no name, no history, just eyes that accused me across the darkness. He paused. I want to remember her as she was, a person, not just a victim. Understanding dawned in Kaya's face. She was strong, she offered, stubborn, like me. She could find healing plants that no one else could see, even in the driest seasons. And she sang while she worked, songs so beautiful that birds would fall silent to listen. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the description replace the bloodied image that had haunted him for so long. Thank you, he said simply. In our beliefs, Kaya continued softly, to speak the names of the dead with respect is to honor their spirit. Perhaps now Morningstar will find peace in your dreams. Perhaps we both will, Ethan agreed. The moment was interrupted by Dakota's return. With him were 3 warriors, young men with determined expressions and weapons at the ready. These will accompany you, Dakota announced. Black Knife, Swift Horse, and 2 ravens. All have fought soldiers before. All speak enough of your tongue for this mission. Ethan nodded to each man in turn, receiving measured nods in response. Not friendship, but professional respect. Soldiers recognizing soldiers across the divide of culture. When do we leave? He asked Dakota. Now, while daylight remains. You must be in position by nightfall. As Ethan gathered his gear and checked his weapons, Kaya approached once more. Without speaking, she removed the jade pendant from around her neck and pressed it into his hand. The sacred stone goes with you, she said quietly. Ethan stared at her in shock. I can't take this. It's too valuable, too important to your people. Exactly why it must go with you, she insisted. If Blackwood breaches our defenses, the first thing he will seek is this stone. He must not find it here. But why give it to me? Why not keep it with you in the cave shelters? Kaya's gaze was steady, certain. Because my father was right. The stone chooses its guardian in times of great change. It has chosen you. Ethan wanted to protest further, but something in her expression stopped him. This wasn't merely pragmatism, it was faith. Belief in something beyond what he could see or understand. Slowly, he slipped the pendant over his head, tucking it beneath his shirt alongside Running Fox's arrowhead and his identification tags. The jade felt cool against his skin, a tangible weight that somehow matched the responsibility it represented. I'll guard it with my life, he promised. I know, she replied simply. Then, unexpected, she leaned forward and pressed her lips briefly to his cheek. Return safely, Ethan Hayes. Your journey is not yet complete. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her slender figure soon lost among the busy encampment. Ethan mounted his rested horse, checking his rifle one final time. The three Apache warriors were already astride their ponies, waiting with the impassive patience of men accustomed to the rhythms of battle. Ready? He asked them. Black Knife, the eldest of the three, nodded once. We ride, Shadowbringer. Together they departed through the western passage, emerging into the late afternoon sunlight. As the hidden entrance to Spirit Valley disappeared behind them, Ethan felt a curious sense of calm descend. Whatever happened in the hours to come, he had found his purpose at last, protecting those who had once been enemies, seeking redemption not through words, but through action. Thomas would have approved, he thought. Perhaps that was legacy enough for the Hayes brothers. They positioned themselves on a rocky outcrop overlooking the approach to Thunder Pass, where the main trail wound between sheer cliffs before opening into the hidden valley beyond. Through his field glass, Ethan could see Blackwood's force, a column of riders moving steadily upward, their progress slowed by the difficult terrain. At the column's center rode Colonel Jeremiah Blackwood himself, unmistakable, even at this distance in his immaculate uniform and straight-back posture. Beside him, flanked by two soldiers, was a man in buckskin clothing, his hands bound before him. Thomas. Ethan's heart jumped at the sight of his brother, alive after so many years of believing him dead. Even at a distance, he could see that Thomas was thinner than he remembered, his once short hair now hanging past his shoulders in the Apache style. But he sat straight in the saddle, head unbowed despite his captivity. That's your brother? Black Knife asked in his halting English, noting the direction of Ethan's gaze. Yes, Ethan confirmed, lowering the field glass. Held close to Blackwood, as expected. Hard to reach, Swift Horse observed. Yes, Ethan agreed, but that's not our mission now. We draw away as many soldiers as possible from the main force, lead them on a chase through the high country. He outlined his plan to the three warriors, who listened with the focused attention of experienced fighters. They would show themselves briefly to Blackwood's scouts, making sure they were identified as an Apache war party with a white leader. Ethan would ensure his face was seen clearly. Then they would retreat along a specific route, drawing pursuers into increasingly difficult terrain where the Apache knowledge of the land would give them advantage. We ride soon, Black Knife confirmed, checking the position of the sun. When shadow touches the tall rock, soldiers will make camp for night. Scouts will range ahead then. Good, Ethan agreed. Remember, our goal is to be seen, then to disappear. Make them chase phantoms through the darkness. As predicted, Blackwood's column halted when the lengthening shadows made further progress dangerous. Campfires bloomed in the gathering dusk, and riders dispersed to establish a perimeter around the main camp. Now, Ethan murmured, mounting his horse. The four riders moved deliberately into the open, positioning themselves atop a ridge clearly visible to the soldiers below. As expected, they were spotted almost immediately. Shouts rose from the camp, and several scouts mounted hastily to investigate. Ethan made sure he was recognizable, standing tall in his stirrups and raising his rifle in a gesture of challenge. Then, at Black Knife's signal, they wheeled their horses and disappeared into the forest as if retreating. They follow? Swift Horse asked, as they rode swiftly along a game trail. Ethan paused to listen. The distant sound of pursuit reached his ears, hoofbeats and men's voices, moving fast but without coordination. Yes, he confirmed. At least 6 riders. More will join them once they report back to Blackwood. They continued through the twilight forest, setting a pace that would allow pursuit to occasionally catch glimpses of them without actually closing the distance. Twice they doubled back, crossing their own trail to create confusion. Once they separated briefly, leaving tracks in 4 directions before reuniting at a predetermined point. As full darkness descended, they reached the first ambush location, a narrow ravine where the trail passed between steep rock walls. 2 ravens dismounted, scaling the cliff with remarkable agility to position himself above the trail. The others continued through the ravine, leaving clear tracks for their pursuers to follow. They hadn't long to wait. Within 20 minutes, the sound of approaching riders echoed through the ravine. 4 soldiers moving cautiously but with determination, rifles ready. From his position atop the cliff, 2 ravens dislodged a carefully prepared pile of rocks. They crashed down onto the trail behind the last rider, effectively cutting off retreat. Simultaneously, Ethan and the other warriors emerged from hiding ahead of the soldiers, weapons trained on the suddenly trapped men. "Drop your rifles," Ethan ordered. "You're surrounded." The soldiers hesitated, assessing their options. One raised his weapon, only to freeze as an arrow from Black Knife's bow embedded itself in the trunk of a tree inches from his head. "Next one won't miss," Ethan warned. "Drop your weapons. Now." Slowly, reluctantly, the soldiers complied. "Dismount," Ethan continued. "Step away from your horses." Again, they obeyed, their expressions of a mixture of fear and fury. "What happens now, Shadowbringer?" Black Knife asked quietly. "We take their weapons, ammunition, and horses," Ethan decided. "Bind them and leave them here. By the time they free themselves and walk back to their camp, the main battle will be decided one way or another." The warriors nodded approval of the plan. Within minutes, the soldiers were securely tied with their own belts and saddlebag straps, their weapons and mounts confiscated. "Tell Colonel Blackwood," Ethan instructed the captives as they prepared to leave, "that Ethan Hayes sends his regards and that he's coming for his brother." They continued their strategic retreat, now with 4 additional horses and weapons. Twice more they set similar ambushes, capturing 6 more soldiers without firing a shot that might alert the main force to their true strategy. By midnight, Ethan estimated they had drawn at least 15 men away from Blackwood's column, more than a third of his force. The Apache defenders at the valley entrance would now face much more manageable odds. "We return to valley?" Swift Horse asked as they paused to rest the horses. Ethan considered. Their diversionary tactic had succeeded beyond expectations. Logic dictated they should rejoin the defense of Spirit Valley, adding their strength to Dakota's warriors. But Thomas remained with Blackwood, a prisoner in the heart of the enemy force. "You 3 return," Ethan decided. "I'm going after my brother." Black Knife frowned. "Dangerous. Many soldiers still with Blackwood." "Fewer than before, thanks to us," Ethan pointed out. "And they'll be focused on the valley entrance, not on guarding a single prisoner." The warriors exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, 2 ravens spoke for the first time since they'd left the valley. "We go together," he said firmly. "All return or none." Ethan was surprised by the declaration of loyalty. "Why would you risk yourselves for my brother? He's not Apache." "Spirit Walker is Owl Clan," Black Knife corrected. "Brother to Kaya, friend to our people. We go together." Moved by their commitment, Ethan nodded acceptance. "Together then, but we'll need a plan more subtle than our previous attacks." As they made their way back toward Blackwood's camp, Ethan outlined his thinking. The soldiers would be preparing for the morning assault on the valley entrance, their attention directed forward rather than to their rear. If Ethan and the warriors could approach unseen, they might locate Thomas and free him before the alarm was raised. "I'll need a distraction," Ethan concluded, "something to draw attention away from wherever they're holding Thomas." "Fire," Swift Horse suggested. "Soldiers fear fire in forest." Ethan nodded. "Good. We'll set fires on the opposite side of the camp from where we believe Thomas is being held. In the confusion, I'll find and free him. If Spirit Walker can ride, we escape together," Black Knife added. "If not, we fight." The grim determination in the warrior's voice left no doubt he was prepared for either outcome. They approached Blackwood's camp with extreme caution, leaving their horses hidden in a draw half a mile away and proceeding on foot. The soldiers' encampment spread across a relatively flat area just below Thunder Pass. Campfires burning low as most men slept in preparation for the morning's battle. Sentries paced the perimeter, but their attention was primarily focused outward, watching for Apache attacks from the direction of the valley. Using every trick he had learned in his years as a scout, Ethan led the warriors in a silent circuit of the camp, searching for signs of where Thomas might be held. They found him near the center of the encampment, in a small tent guarded by two soldiers. Through a gap in the tent flap, Ethan could see his brother, seated on the ground, hands still bound, head bowed as if in sleep or meditation. "Too many eyes," Black Knife whispered, indicating the surrounding tents where soldiers slept. "Need big distraction." "Agreed," Ethan murmured. "Swift horse, two ravens. Set fires on the far side of the camp. Multiple locations. Make them believe it's a full Apache attack." The warriors nodded and melted into the darkness. Ethan and Black Knife settled into position, waiting for chaos to erupt. They didn't wait long. Within 15 minutes, shouts of alarm rose from the far side of the camp as the first fires caught and spread. Soldiers stumbled from their tents, officers barked orders, and men rushed toward the growing blaze with buckets and blankets. "Now," Ethan whispered. They moved swiftly through the suddenly active camp, keeping to shadows and using the confusion to mask their approach. The two guards at Thomas's tent had turned to watch the commotion, their attention momentarily diverted. Black Knife's arrow took the first guard in the shoulder, driving him to the ground with a muffled screech. Before the second could react, Ethan was upon him, the butt of his rifle connecting with the man's temple in a precise strike that rendered him unconscious without the noise of a gunshot. Ethan slashed open the tent with his knife, dropping to one knee beside the startled prisoner within. "Thomas," he breathed, scarcely believing he was finally face to face with his brother after so many years. Thomas Hayes stared at his older brother, shock giving way to recognition. "Ethan?" he whispered hoarsely. "How?" "Later," Ethan interrupted, cutting the ropes that bound Thomas's wrist. "Can you walk?" "Yes," Thomas affirmed, rising shakily to his feet. "But Blackwood is busy with fires and missing soldiers," Ethan assured him, guiding his brother from the tent. "We have horses waiting. If we move now, we can be halfway to Spirit Valley before they organize a pursuit." Black Knife had secured the perimeter, ensuring their escape route remained clear. Together, they half-led, half-carried Thomas through the chaotic camp, using the continuing distraction of the fires to cover their movement. They had nearly reached the edge of the encampment when a voice rang out behind them, cold, commanding, and instantly recognizable to Ethan. "Hayes, stop or I shoot the Apache." Ethan turned slowly, pushing Thomas behind him. Colonel Jeremiah Blackwood stood 20 paces away, revolver aimed not at Ethan, but at Black Knife, who had been covering their rear. "Blackwood," Ethan acknowledged, mind racing to find a way out of this confrontation. The colonel's face was illuminated by the distant fires, highlighting the deep lines of cruelty etched around his mouth and eyes. He looked older than Ethan remembered, but no less dangerous. Perhaps more so with the added weight of rank and power. "I should have known you'd turn up," Blackwood said, a thin smile spreading across his face. The disgraced scout, the Apache sympathizer, coming to rescue his traitorous brother. How predictable. "And you're still hunting innocent people for your own gain," Ethan countered. "Some things never change." "Innocent?" Blackwood scoffed. "These savages have raided settlements, killed white families, stolen livestock. I'm merely bringing order to the frontier." "You're bringing death for profit," Thomas spoke up, his voice stronger now. "You don't care about settlers or soldiers. You want Spirit Valley for yourself, for the gold you believe is there." "Gold, water, land, all valuable commodities," Blackwood shrugged. "Progress requires resources, Hayes. Surely even you can understand that." As he spoke, Ethan noted movement in the darkness behind Blackwood. Swift Horse and two ravens returning from their fire-setting mission. If he could keep the colonel talking just a little longer. "And what about Yellow Creek?" Ethan asked, deliberately provocative. "Was massacring women and children progress as well?" Anger flashed across Blackwood's face. "You were a soldier once. You know sacrifices must be made in war." "That wasn't war," Ethan said quietly. "That was murder." Blackwood's expression hardened. "Enough talk. Drop your weapons, all of you, or I put a bullet in this one. He gestured with his revolver toward Black Knife, who stood motionless, face impassive despite the threat. You're surrounded, Blackwood, Ethan bluffed. Apache warriors in the trees all around us. Lower your weapon, and you might live to see morning. The colonel laughed coldly, a desperate lie from a desperate man. His finger tightened on the trigger. Before he could fire, an arrow whistled through the darkness, striking Blackwood's hand. The revolver discharged harmlessly into the ground as he cried out in pain and surprise. Swift Horse and two ravens emerged from the shadows, bows drawn and aimed at the colonel's heart. Not lie, Black Knife said with grim satisfaction. Truth. Blackwood clutched his wounded hand to his chest, blood seeping between his fingers. His face contorted with rage and pain. Kill me, and every soldier in this camp will hunt you down, he snarled. We're not going to kill you, Ethan said, stepping forward to retrieve the fallen revolver. You're going to face justice for your crimes. Yellow Creek, the attacks on peaceful Apache bands, the false report of Thomas's death. Justice? Blackwood sneered. There's no justice on the frontier, Hayes, only white power. And I still command 50 men who will overrun your precious Apache friends by noon tomorrow. 35 men, Ethan corrected. We've already neutralized 15 of your force, and they'll face 30 Apache warriors in terrain they know intimately, defending their families and their sacred land. He smiled grimly. I don't like your odds, Colonel. Fury and calculation warred in Blackwood's eyes. Ethan could almost see him reassessing, adapting his strategy to this new reality. What do you want, Hayes? He asked finally. A truce? Safe passage for these savages to some new reservation? Name your price. I want the truth about Yellow Creek officially acknowledged, Ethan said. I want the attacks on the Apache to stop, and I want Spirit Valley recognized as sovereign Apache territory, off limits to settlers and the Army alike. Blackwood laughed bitterly. Impossible demands. The Army would never agree. They might, Thomas interjected, when they learn that their esteemed colonel has been conducting unauthorized attacks on peaceful tribes, falsifying reports, and pursuing personal wealth at the expense of military objectives. My reports are countersigned by superior officers, Blackwood retorted. Your word against mine, a deserter and a disgraced scout. Not just our word, Ethan said quietly. We have the testimony of captured soldiers, Apache witnesses, and documentary evidence of your plans for the valley. This last was a bluff, but from the flicker of uncertainty in Blackwood's eyes, it struck close to home. Bind him, Ethan instructed the warriors. We're taking him to Spirit Valley. Let him face the judgment of those he's hunted. As Black Knife secured the colonel's hands with strips of rawhide, Ethan turned to his brother. In the flickering light of the distant fires, he could see Thomas more clearly now, the lines of hardship etched on his face, the quiet strength in his bearing that had not been there when they were young. You look terrible, Ethan said with a faint smile. Thomas's laugh was rusty from disuse. You look old, brother. Getting shot at tends to age a man, Ethan replied. Then more seriously, I thought you were dead, all these years. I'm sorry, Thomas said simply. At first I couldn't risk contacting you, not after I deserted. Then after I found my place with the Apache, with Kaya, he shrugged. I thought you wouldn't understand. I wouldn't have, Ethan acknowledged. Not then. I needed to see them as people first, not just enemies. And now? Ethan glanced at the three Apache warriors, men who had risked their lives alongside him, who had insisted on helping rescue a white man they called brother. Now I understand better than you might think, he said. Their moment of reunion was interrupted by Black Knife's urgent signal. More soldiers come, he warned, pointing toward movement in the camp. We go now. With Blackwood securely bound and mounted on a captured horse, they slipped away from the chaotic encampment and into the protective darkness of the forest. By the time the colonel was discovered missing, they were already miles away, riding hard for the western entrance to Spirit Valley. Dawn found them approaching the hidden passage, exhausted but triumphant. The Apache sentries challenged them briefly before recognizing their companions and the significance of their prisoner. As they emerged into Spirit Valley, the rising sun bathed the landscape in golden light. Near the lake, they could see activity, warriors preparing defenses, women carrying supplies to the cave shelters. Dakota met them at the main encampment, his expression shifting from relief to grim satisfaction as he recognized Blackwood. "You have succeeded beyond hope," he said to Ethan, clasping his arm in the warrior's greeting. "Not only Spirit Walker returned, but the enemy chief captured. 15 of his soldiers neutralized as well," Ethan reported. "The odds at Thunder Pass are much more even now." "Good," Dakota nodded. "Our warriors are in position. If Blackwood's men still attack, they will find no easy victory." From one of the larger wickiups, Kaya emerged, stopping in her tracks at the sight of Thomas. For a moment, neither moved, separated by space yet connected by something deeper than mere physical presence. Then she was running, and Thomas dismounted in a fluid motion, catching her in his arms with such tenderness that Ethan had to look away, the moment too private for observation. When he glanced back, they were still embracing, Kaya's face buried against Thomas's shoulder, his brother's hand gently stroking her hair as he murmured words too soft to hear. "The circle closes," Dakota observed quietly beside Ethan. "Spirit Walker returns to his heart's home." "Yes," Ethan agreed, a complex emotion rising in his chest. Joy for his brother's reunion with the woman he loved, yet a faint echo of loss for all the years they had been separated, all the pain that might have been avoided if different choices had been made at Yellow Creek, at Fort Apache, in all the places where hatred had triumphed over humanity. As if sensing his thoughts, Dakota spoke again. "The past cannot be undone, Shadowbringer, but the future is not yet written." Before Ethan could respond, a sentry's call rang out from the western heights. Soldiers approaching Thunder Pass, preparing for assault on the valley entrance. The moment of reunion was over. The battle for Spirit Valley lasted from dawn until dusk. Blackwood's men, leaderless and facing determined Apache defenders in unfamiliar territory, fought with diminishing resolve as the day wore on. By sunset, the remaining soldiers had retreated, carrying their wounded back toward Fort Apache. Ethan, Thomas, and Dakota stood at the valley entrance as the last rays of light painted the cliffs in gold and crimson. Bodies lay scattered along the narrow pass, mostly soldiers, but a few Apache warriors as well. The cost had been high, but Spirit Valley remained free. "They will return," Dakota said quietly. "Perhaps not tomorrow, but someday." "Not if we negotiate peace first," Thomas replied. "This victory gives us leverage." Ethan nodded agreement. "With Blackwood as our prisoner and evidence of his crimes, we can force the army to recognize this territory as Apache land." They returned to the encampment where Blackwood remained under guard, his wounded hand bandaged, but his eyes still burning with hatred. Kaya was tending to injured warriors, her healing skills in constant demand throughout the day of fighting. That night, a council gathered around the central fire. Elders who had evacuated to the cave shelters during the battle now joined warriors, women, and the Hayes brothers to determine the future of Spirit Valley and its people. "We have won today," Dakota began, "but the Bluecoats have many soldiers. We cannot fight them forever." An elder woman spoke, her face lined with years of wisdom. "Spirit Valley has protected our people for generations. It will continue to do so." "Perhaps," Thomas said, "but we need more than physical protection. We need recognition, legal standing that even the army must respect." Ethan stepped forward, the jade pendant visible against his chest. "I will take Blackwood to Fort Apache, present evidence of his crimes to the commanding officer. With Thomas's testimony and the captured soldiers as witnesses, we can negotiate terms." Debate continued into the night, but eventually consensus formed around a daring plan. Ethan would escort Blackwood to Fort Apache, while Thomas and Kaya would remain in Spirit Valley, ready to evacuate their people if negotiations failed. At dawn, Ethan prepared to depart with his prisoner. Kaya approached, studying him with those penetrating dark eyes that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. "The sacred stone," she said, gesturing to the pendant he still wore. "It has served its purpose with you, Bamit." Ethan touched the cool jade. "I should return it to you before I leave." She shook her head. "Not yet. My father believes its journey continues with you for now." Speaking of Red Cloud, the aging chief had been brought to the valley during the night. Though weakened by his wound, he had insisted on being present for the council. Now he beckoned Ethan to his side. Shadowbringer, the old man said, his voice barely above a whisper. You have walked the path between darkness and light, between two worlds. Ethan knelt beside the chief's pallet. I've tried to do what's right. That's all. Red Cloud's weathered hand reached for the jade pendant. This stone has been passed through generations of our people, always finding the one who stands at the crossroads of change. His eyes held Ethan's. You will be that bridge between your people and mine. The responsibility weighed heavily on Ethan, but he nodded acceptance. I'll do my best to honor your trust. As he mounted his horse, Thomas approached. The brothers embraced, years of separation dissolving in the simple human contact. Be careful, Thomas said. The army won't take kindly to Blackwood's disgrace. I know their ways, Ethan replied with a grim smile. And I know which officers value justice over politics. When will you return? Ethan glanced at Blackwood, bound and mounted on a horse nearby. When this is finished, one way or another. As he prepared to depart, Kaya joined them. She reached up to touch Ethan's scarred hand. You asked if redemption was possible, she said softly. Look around you, at the lives you have helped save, at my brother returned to me, at the valley, still free. One good deed doesn't erase the past, Ethan said. No, she agreed, but it begins a new future. With a final nod to his brother and Kaya, Ethan turned his horse toward the passage that would lead back to the world of the white man. He rode with Blackwood beside him and two Apache warriors as escorts, living symbols of the bridge he was attempting to build. 3 weeks later, Ethan returned to Spirit Valley alone. The sentries recognized him immediately, escorting him to the central encampment where Thomas and Kaya waited anxiously for news. It's done, Ethan said simply as he dismounted. Blackwood has been court-martialed and imprisoned. Spirit Valley is recognized as Apache territory, with boundaries clearly marked on army maps. The news spread quickly through the encampment. That night, celebration fires burned brightly as the people of the Owl clan gathered to hear the full story. The army sent investigators, Ethan explained to the council. They interviewed the captured soldiers, examined Blackwood's private papers. The evidence was overwhelming, not just against him, but against several officers who had profited from attacks on peaceful Apache bands. And they agreed to peace? Dakota asked, skepticism evident in his voice. Not out of goodwill, Ethan admitted, but necessity. With public sentiment turning against Indian wars and budget constraints limiting military operations, they decided recognizing one valley was preferable to continued conflict. Thomas smiled. The bridge I always dreamed of building. A beginning, Ethan corrected. There will be challenges ahead. Settlers pushing boundaries, young warriors testing limits. But it's a start. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Ethan stood with Thomas and Kaya at the edge of the lake. The water reflected a sky brilliant with stars, nature's indifferent beauty a counterpoint to human struggles. Will you stay? Thomas asked quietly. Ethan considered the question. For so long, his life had been defined by solitude, by running from the ghosts of Yellow Creek. Now those ghosts had names, faces, stories. They were no longer accusers, but witnesses to his change. I don't belong here, he said finally. Not fully, but I don't belong out there anymore either. He gestured toward the world beyond the valley. Then build something new, Kaya suggested, between both worlds. The idea took root as Ethan remembered Red Cloud's words about standing at the crossroads of change. Perhaps that was his purpose now, not to belong fully to either world, but to help them understand each other. There's a trading post near Thunder Pass, he said slowly. Abandoned since the owner died last winter. I could reopen it, create a neutral place where Apache and settlers might meet in peace. Thomas clasped his shoulder. A worthy purpose. As they spoke, Morningstar's last words to her daughter came back to Kaya. Remember his face. He lowered his rifle. Perhaps she had seen even then the possibility of this moment. Enemies becoming allies, bridges spanning chasms of misunderstanding. Ethan touched the jade pendant, warm now from contact with his skin. It had traveled a long path to reach him, from Thomas to Kaya to him. A sacred trust passed between worlds, just as he himself had crossed boundaries he once thought impermeable. Shadowbringer no more, Kaya said softly as if reading his thoughts. Now Lightbearer. Ethan smiled, the weight of his old name finally lifting from his shoulders. The dawn of a new day, a new identity, a new purpose breaking across the horizon of his life. The circle was complete.